Hi to everybody. My name is Moshe Shechter. I'm the Alma product manager, focusing mainly on the areas of resource sharing, fulfillment, user management, and such. And our session today is intended to be actually a part two of a session we've had a couple of weeks ago when we talked about resource sharing. We didn't manage to cover all the issues that we wanted to cover, so here we are with a part two of that session. And we would like today to discuss additional issues that have been raised by you and others about resource sharing. And perhaps we can just start right now. So, the first issue that I put up here that came in has to do with allowing items for shipping for resource sharing requests. The question is, can I set up items to be not allowed for shipping to a resource sharing partner? Well, actually, there are two use cases that have to do with this scenario. One has to do with items that are really not requestable for resource sharing. That may be items that are either for not for circulating at all, or items that are intended for internal circulation, that is within the library, but not intended to be used for resource sharing requests, that is, that are not supposed to be sent out to other libraries. That's one scenario. Another may be where there is multiple campuses, and we've talked about multiple campuses in the previous session, such that each of these campuses runs its own resource sharing operations, has its own resource sharing library in Alma terms. Therefore, each such resource sharing library would like to make use only of items that belong to libraries of that specific campus. So, resource sharing library of campus A, we would like to make use of items only from libraries in campus A, and so on. Both of these options are configurable, and what I'd like to do in the next couple of minutes is to go through the configuration options for this. So first of all, and talking about the first scenario where I just want to disable items from being requestable for resource sharing, that is done from the request terms of use. So what I'm looking at right now is a normal fulfillment unit, and by saying normal fulfillment unit, I mean to say a fulfillment unit of a normal library, that is not of the resource sharing library. And in that fulfillment unit, that is where we set the policies, the request policies for the items of that fulfillment unit. So when looking at the rules, the request rules, and looking at a specific rule, we can see the terms of use that is set up by that rule, and it includes all the request policies that we're all familiar with, such as is item requestable or not, where the pickup locations may be, what the hold shelf period may be, but one of the policies, and the one that we're focusing at right now, is requestable for resource sharing. This is actually a policy that you need to turn on if you want this item to be allowed for fulfilling a resource sharing request. So, if you have the terms of use which is not requestable, as in this example, you probably want to set this policy also to be not requestable for resource sharing to prevent it from being requestable for lending requests. However, even if it is requestable, the is requestable policy is true, you may still want to set the resource sharing policy to be not requestable if you do not want that to be usable for resource sharing requests, for lending resource sharing requests. Turning off this option has the following effect. I'm looking now at a lending requests task list, and I see the list of requests that are waiting for me to manage, me as a lender. I can see that these two requests do have items, available items. For the first request, there's an item in the graduate library. For the second one, there is one in the main library. So I know all of the inventory that exists for this title. However, if I want to do anything with those, I want to ship them, I have to look into the Manage Fulfillment options. And in there, I may see a screen such as this. No physical services showing here. And instead of that, having a message on the top here saying some of the existing physical inventory may not be used for fulfilling resource sharing requests due to library policies. So maybe that the fulfillment options is totally empty, being that all the items are not requestable, as in this example, or maybe that some of them are and some aren't, and those that are requestable will show up, and those that aren't will be eliminated, and we'll have this message on the top here. So that's what the Manage Fulfillment options looks like if the items are removed because of a policy, and that's what it looks like if none of the items have been removed from this screen because of policies. Then I will see all of the items as requestable in this screen. So this actually covers the first scenario. I have items. I just don't want to use them for resource sharing requests. I turn off the policy. They will be removed from the Manage Fulfillment options where I get the indication of these items not being requestable. Next we have the other scenario, which is the scenario with multiple campuses. And actually this could be a scenario of multiple campuses such as I described. It could also be within a single campus. At times there may be multiple resource sharing libraries. A common example would be one for the law library and one for the rest of the campus. But there could be other scenarios as well. In that case, again, we want each resource sharing library to make use of items only from specific libraries. For example, the law library, resource sharing library, will make use only of items in the law library, while the rest of campus resource sharing library will make use of all other libraries on campus. In that case, the configuration is set up in a relationship that is called the supply from relationship. So when I'm looking at a specific library in the fulfillment configuration and looking at its relationships, if it is a resource sharing library, I will see this additional relation type, the supply from. Again, that will show up for, this is relevant for resource sharing libraries only. What this means in this example is that my resource sharing library can only use items of the main library, or in this example, also of the rare books, which would probably be a scenario that wouldn't be considered. But I have, for all other libraries, I don't have this relation set up, so I cannot make use of their items for my resource sharing requests. The result of having this set up in this way would be that when I'm looking at my vending requests task list, as I'm doing right now, I will not see these items at all. So if I'm now an operator in Campus A, and all of the items of this requested title belong to Campus B, I will not see them at all. They will not show on my task list at all. They will show only if my resource sharing library has a supply from relation with the libraries that own these items. In that case, that's of course what it looks like. So if I do have a relation with the main library options here, and again, there may be that there are other copies in other libraries, but being that I do not have a supply from relation with them, I will not see them in my task list. So these are the two scenarios where I do not want items to be requestable for resource sharing, and these are the two different options for configuring that, through the policies or through the library relations. I didn't include that in my introduction, but I will say now that if as I go through these questions, any of you wants to remark, you can just jump in and comment or ask. Of course, if you feel more comfortable using the chat to do that, that's of course also a valid option. Do feel free to jump in with anything at any point. I will continue with the next question that came in, and that has to do with configuring the allowed pickup locations. So now we're not talking about lending requests, we are talking about borrowing requests, and we would like to configure the allowed pickup locations for our borrowing requests. The way to do that would be by configuring the policies in the fulfillment unit of the resource sharing library. So in this case, we're not talking about the general or the other libraries for fulfillment. We're talking about the resource sharing library fulfillment unit. And here I would like to make a comment that the recommended practice would be for the resource sharing library to have its own fulfillment unit. So unlike other libraries where using institution level fulfillment units would be a way to consolidate policies and rules, and perhaps would be a recommended way to do it. In case of resource sharing libraries, the recommended usage would be using the resource sharing library fulfillment unit, a specific fulfillment unit to the resource sharing library. That gives you a number of options, one of which is the pickup locations that we are about to show. So I'm right now looking at a list of fulfillment units, and I will be looking at a specific fulfillment unit which belongs to my resource sharing library, the one that I am configuring right now. The options that I have when configuring a fulfillment unit of a specific resource sharing library, I have additional options for rule types. One is borrowing resource sharing rule type, and another is the lending one, which we're not about to discuss now. But the borrowing resource sharing rule type is what enables me to set up policies that have to do with how borrowing requests are placed in this resource sharing library. We're looking at the rules, and the rules here would normally be based on user group, so that I can say that different users in my resource sharing library may place requests under different terms of use. And the policies under the terms of use include is resource sharing at all allowed for this user group? Will there be fees? Is there a limit? And what the pickup locations are. And this is actually what we'd like to focus on. This is where I can set up what the allowed pickup locations are. So this policy, like the pickup locations policy that is used for the standard requests terms of use, it has the same behavior. In other words, I may set up a value here to say in library only, which would effectively mean that the requests being placed can only be picked up at the resource sharing library, and that would be the option for you to use if the policy is for the patrons to walk over into the resource sharing office and actually pick up their items over there. In that case, you set this up only. The annual option that you see here, perhaps will be the more popular option, would enable the patrons to pick up the resource sharing items at any of the standard circulation desks within the library. Just like the standard requests policy, this anywhere option actually means that any library that has a deliver to with the resource sharing library will be listed as a valid pickup location. So if I set this up to be anywhere, but I have a deliver to relation with only 2 or 3 libraries, only these 2 or 3 libraries will show up. One more comment about this would be that the resource sharing library itself always shows up as a valid pickup location. The owning library always shows up as a valid pickup location. The way to turn that off, if you do not want the items to be requestable for pickup at the resource sharing library, would be to make sure that your circulation desks within the resource sharing library do not have whole shelves. Libraries that do not have desks with whole shelves are removed from the list of pickup locations. We are aware of an issue here with the Primo list that does show up even if you remove it from the whole chat. We're working on fixing that, but that's how the configuration needs to be set up. Okay, so that's with pickup locations. There is a comment here that I saw that came in asking for the fees, because I did mention, the policy here for fees, and that is true. That is not yet supported, this option for the fees. It is planned, I believe. I believe this will come in with the June releases, as far as I recall. One of the releases that we're working on now, so I think it is the, if not the June, then the June. And the fee here will work such that the fee will be created at the time that the item is received. So it's not going to be created when the request is created. It's going to be created when the requested item is actually received. I do not recall currently if it's the June release or the July one. I believe it is the July one, in which we will make this work as planned.
But everybody has, because it allows you when you validate.
Is this requestable?
I will continue on with the next question, and again, let me, if you have questions such as the one that I just talked about that came in through the chat, feel free to submit those with the chat. I have the chat in front of me, so I try to have anything coming in there. And of course, if you want to speak up and raise it in our discussion, that's also, of course, a valid option. I will continue with our next question here, which has to do with managing the list of potential suppliers. The question is, I would like to place requests with my list of potential suppliers in a predefined sequence. Is that possible to set up? Okay, so managing the list of suppliers can be done through the ROTA templates. The ROTA templates are configurable from the fulfillment configuration in the resource sharing section of that screen. And there are two options for setting up ROTA templates. The ROTA templates are the groups of partners bound into a group that we call the ROTA template. And these ROTA templates may be of two types, either ordered or non-ordered. The ordered one means that the partners in this ROTA will be added to a request in the same sequence that they are in the ROTA template. So when I'm now looking at the template members, I can see a list of members, and if this ROTA template is used for a request, the partners will be added in exactly this same order. So it's always going to be first, and then second, then third, then fourth. And that's because I've created this ROTA template as an ordered one. I may create it as a non-ordered one in my type. In that case, my list of partners does not have any sequence. So you notice that before I was able to move up or down. That's because there is significance to where in the list they are. Now when I'm talking about a non-ordered one, there are no arrows. There is no significance for what is first and what is second. When this ROTA will be attached to a request, the partners will be added in a random order. So at times it may be 1 and then 2, at times it may be 2 and then 1, and it's done in a totally random way. So if they are all equal and you do not care which comes before the other, you can create them as non-ordered. In fact, many times you would like to create them as non-ordered, not because you do not care in what sequence they happen, but because you want them to sometimes be 1 then 2 and sometimes 2 then 1 for the sake of balancing the requests, so they do not all go out to the same suppliers, but sometimes to one and sometimes to the second. That will be the use case where you would like to make use of this non-ordered option. Now comes the last piece here, and that is the rota assignment rules. That is another option that is configurable in the resource sharing section of the fulfillment configuration. There's the rota template we were just looking at now, and there is the rota assignment rules. The rota assignment rules enable you to set up what rotas will be added, what rota templates will be added to a request, and in what sequence. So you see here that these rules do have a move up, move down option, and that is because their sequence does have significance. The rule here will define whether a specific rota will be added to a request. So for example, the rule may say that if the price is less than, or if the requester is of type this or that, this rota template will be used. This is not the focus of this discussion. What I want to say is that each one of these rules will eventually say add this rota template to this request. So I may have this rule cause the automatic rota assignments engine to add a rota template that includes partners A, B, and C, which are not ordered. So they may be ABC or CBA or any other permutation of this. I may have another rule here that means add DEF again in a non-ordered, so it may be in any order. And I may have a third rule, which would be G, H, and I, and this one is sequence, so it's always G, then H, then I. These are partners. If all three rules apply to my request, so that when I submit my request, the request matches the input parameters of all these rules, I will have all three rota templates added to my request. They will be added in this exact order, first, then second, then third. But being that this rota template and the second one are both non-ordered, the sequencing with any twin of them will be random. So it may be BCA, and then EFD, and then GHI, which will always be added in this exact sequence. So you may have a bunch of rota templates. You may set up the sequence in which the templates will be added, and you may set up whether within each template you want the order to be predefined or you want it to be random. So that gives a pretty large amount of flexibility in how you want to manage these templates. Many times you'll just have a single template which will just add everything randomly, or you will have one or two that are your first choices and you always want them to be first. So you set them as a template, and then you set the rule to be first, and then you have another rule for all of the others, which may be random. Or at times you may have another option to say for a first rule to add something, a rota template that is a non-order one, to say any one of these in whatever sequence, add all of these in whatever sequence, and then there's a last resort, which you want to be last. You don't want to go to that first. You would have a last rule here, which would add that last resort. So you'd have rules that add all the others in whatever order, and a rule that adds a specific one always as last. So you have all these options, add this as first, or add this as last, or any other option with this. Okay, so that's specifically about ordering the suppliers. And we can move on to the next question that we received, and that has to do with shipping costs. As Fraser have noticed, the request shipping costs, not clear on how they can be used, so elaborate on that. So again, in the resource sharing section of this configuration, we have options for setting up rules to automatically create shipping costs, lender or borrower side. These rules may be set up, again, depending on the format of the request and depending on who's the requester and so on and so forth. You may set up automatically what costs you want to attach to lending or borrowing requests. On a borrowing request form, you have the shipping cost, which again, if you've set up a rule will be automatically populated based on that rule, or you can always add this manually at any point in the life cycle of the request. Likewise, you have on the lending request a shipping cost field, which again will be automatically populated if you have lender rules, or can be manually populated at any point in the life cycle of this request. If the communication between lender and borrower is based on the ISO protocol, this piece of information is communicated via the protocol, so that when the lender sets up a shipping cost, that will be automatically updated on the borrower's request. So no need to manually add it, and that of course makes sense. The shipping costs many times are controlled by the lender and need to be communicated to the borrower. If it is not an ISO-based communication, of course, these fields have to be managed either via the rules or manually. I would just like to comment that in a near release, I believe it is the June one, we will be adding the option for manually overriding costs at the lender side when doing shipping. So you may have rules that do some automatic calculation, or you may not have them, whatever you choose. But as of June, when doing the shipping, you'll be able to manually set the exact shipping costs at the time you do the shipping. Of course, it'll be optional, but will be an option that is currently not there. Shipping costs are currently informational. They are not used in the system in any case. We do have roadmap plans for next year to link these costs up to patron fees or to library funds, so that these costs may be encumbered against existing funds or may be posed on the patrons, the requesters. This is not yet the case. Again, this is planned for next year, not this year. What is planned to happen with these fields this year is to make them reportable in analytics, so that you will be able to run quarterly or yearly, whatever reports that will be enable you to see the shipping costs of the requests. So it is not yet there in analytics. It's going to happen again in one of the new releases this summer, and that's shipping costs. Okay.
Yes, it would. And Hellboy.
Okay. I will go on to the next topic, and again, if anyone wants to comment, feel free to do that as we speak, either online or using the chat, whichever you feel more comfortable with. Okay, the next comment here, question is about configuration options with regard to the resource sharing request form. So, the configuration options start by saying that there aren't that many options for configuring the form itself. The options that do exist are the options for configuring the CSS for the GetIt. So the options, the configuration, the look and feel options that the CSS configuration enables for the rest of the GetIt can also be used to make look and feel changes for this. And there is the option, and it is used by users, to use an API, a web service for submitting resource sharing requests. This web service may or allows you to actually create whatever form you like, customize it in any way you want, that is, remove fields, change the order of fields, and of course, change the look and feel of the form freely, as it is your own form, and then use the web service to actually submit this request directly into Alma. This API is in use by some of you. Some of the users are actually making use of this API using forms and I'm sure would be more than willing to share this web form based on the Alma API, and then you can do whatever you want with the form using this API. Within Alma, other than the CSS configuration that I mentioned, there is the option to configure which fields on the form are mandatory. That is configurable. And the way to do that is using the options that I've highlighted here. Again, we're in the fulfillment configuration screen, and we're looking at options that in this case are part of the general configuration. And the reason for that is that they affect not only resource sharing requests, but also other areas where you briefly catalog items. So if you do brief cataloging of physical items, or for example, if you do brief cataloging from the reading list, these are all linked to this option. So configuring anything that is mandatory makes it mandatory when creating a physical item from the brief cataloging option, or when cataloging reading list citations. What these forms enable you to do is, first of all, of course, you have the option to leave fields as optional. This example here, which is the article form mandatory field, lists all of the fields that are relevant for articles or journals. Out of the box, the mandatory field here is the article title. That is mandatory. But I may set up any other field to also be mandatory. So I may say I want also the journal title to be mandatory by turning this option on. Additionally, I have options here to set up groups. Groups actually mean that one of these fields will be mandatory. So for example, I can say, since group 1 here is a label that has been attached to both the ISSN and the DOI, it actually means that a request must be submitted with either one of these identifiers, either an ISSN or a DOI. Likewise, I created another group here, which is group 2, which includes end page, pages, and start page. And that would mean that one of these 3 fields has to be submitted for a request to be valid. If none of them is submitted, an error will show up in Alma and in Primo saying you must fill in one of these fields, pages, start page, or end page. So you can set up a number of groups here. You may set up what is optional or what is mandatory, and this will affect both the Alma form and the Primo form. So we'll continue on to the next comment, which has to do with history requests and analytics. Are my history requests reportable in analytics? So perhaps a comment here about history requests. Requests may reach a final state, either if they've been fully processed, that is, there was a full request to receive loan return cycle on the borrowing side or on the lending side. In that case, the request has a status of request completed. There may be another final status, which may be request canceled or rejected. These requests remain on the task list. They remain on the list. They may be faceted, of course, by their status. And of course, as long as they remain there, they're not different from any other active requests in terms of reporting and analytics. However, you may choose to remove them. So even though they exist on your task list, and you may choose the status that you want to work on and work only on those that interest you, naturally you will want to at some point also remove these requests, or they continue to pile up on the list. Removing requests is an option, either as a multiple select option or as for a specific request. And removing this request with an enhancement that we're doing this month, I believe, with the June release, would mean that, or actually with the April release, would mean that removing the request will still keep it reportable in analytics. So you will be able to remove these requests, but still have them reportable. They will be removed from your task list, but still show in analytics and still be reportable in analytics. Okay. Another, and that is an important issue, I think we may have touched upon this in a previous session, and it has to do with managing due dates for received user sharing requests. So a few words about that. Actually, with the March release, we've integrated the due dates, the resource sharing due dates, with the rest of the fulfillment, so that if a borrowing request has a due date that has been either communicated via ISO or manually set up, doesn't make a difference, created at the time of receive, whatever, these due dates take effect when the item is placed on the hold shelf or when the item is actually loaned out. So the hold shelf expiry is the due date minus the delivery delay, and the same calculation is used for the loan due date. So for example, if I have a due date that the lender has set, which is May 15th, I may have on the partner record for that supplier, I may have set up a delivery delay of 3 days, which reflects the fact that it takes me 3 days to ship an item back to that supplier, maybe as a result of that supplier being geographically away from me, or any other main limitations, which mean it takes me 3 days to actually get the item back to that partner. So if that partner shipped me an item and set the due date to be May 15th, being that I have a delivery delay of 3 days, the expiry for the hold shelf will be May 12th, 3 days before this due date. So the patron will receive a notification saying this item is waiting for you at the hold shelf and will be there until May 12th. Likewise, the loan, when that loan is done, will also be a loan until this May 12th date. As of the March release, this is the behavior of the system. So if you do not want to make use of these due dates, for whatever reason, you have to actually remove the due date from the borrowing request. That is the situation with the March release. Now, there may be another way to manage due dates, and that is to say that regardless of the lender due date, I may want to use a specific due date, which, for example, may be set up to be always 4 weeks for the patron. So if my lenders normally allow me for 2 months, I would still want to use the same 4 weeks for my patrons, so they always get the same loan period, and not, sometimes 2 months and sometimes a month and a half, depending on how long it took for the item to physically be borrowed by the patron. If I want to set up my predetermined policies, that with the March release has to be done by removing the due date from the borrowing request. If there is a due date, it will be used. With the, again, the June release, I believe, we want to actually enable a configuration, an attribute to be configured to say, I want to ignore the lender due dates. In that case, the due dates will be calculated based on the fulfillment unit of the resource sharing library as it has been prior to the March release, or as it currently behaves if there is no due date on the borrowing request. So again, currently you may be using due dates set up on the fulfillment unit of the resource sharing library if there is no due date on the borrowing request. If there is one, that due date will be used, and the upcoming June release, it will be possible to actually tell the system to ignore the due date and use only a due date that is configured in my fulfillment unit. A question came here about the due dates, and it is, can we confirm that the due date for the resource sharing borrow request is not altered by close date for any pickup library. So like any other due dates that is calculated by the system, the due dates are affected by the calendar of the owning library. So in this case, being the resource sharing library, that is the calendar that affects the date of these borrowing request items. The resource sharing library is the owner, and its calendar is the one that affects the due date, like it does for, like the calendar does for any other standard loan. Okay, we'll continue. We don't have, we will be able to complete all of the issues that came in. Yes, there is a follow-up here on this. The question is, so closed library due date management policy is important. Yes, the resource sharing library, like any other library, has policies and has a calendar, and that has to be set up according to your policies. Okay, so thank you for all of you submitting here through the chat, and those of you that are not, feel free to do that. Others are doing that, and I will continue with the next comment here. The next question: will you allow reply messages from British Library to be fed into Alma automatically? That's an excellent question. And I would like to clarify British Library and ArtMail and where we stand with that. As you know, and many of you are using ArtMail to communicate with the British Library, is of course an option and of course supported. British Library is actively working on APIs, BLDSS, British Library Document Service, Document Supply Service, and they are rolling out these APIs, and in fact have announced that ArtMail will eventually be obsolete. They're talking about 2 or 3 years from now to make ArtMail obsolete and stop using it and start the APIs that they are working on. We are actively British Library on these APIs, and the future for British Library communications is in these APIs. So we do not have any plans to enhance the ArtMail functionality. That is something that will soon be obsolete. We will work on these British Library APIs with users that are willing to use them, and that's actually where the roadmap, the future roadmap for BL communications is going to be. So thank you for any of you who have raised this. It's something important for you folks to be aware of and know where this is going. I will go on. We're almost done. And this is, as we phrased as, why are we not permitted to issue loans borrowing side of resource sharing to a generic library card? So perhaps the not permitted term here is a bit too harsh. You are, of course, permitted to do anything you want, and you can manage processes whichever way makes sense to you. The Alma built-in workflow is intended to reflect as much as possible the real-life workflow, meaning to reflect what is actually happening, so that on the lender side, we're not using loans to label items shipped. Instead of that, we're changing the responsibility of the item to be the resource sharing library. And likewise, on the borrowing side, we're creating temporary items that are at the responsibility of the resource sharing library and maybe loaned to real patrons using standard loans. And we've talked about due dates and hold shelves and so on. If you have preference for doing it differently, and it makes sense to you, of course, you can do that. If you'd like to use a single generic library card, or if you'd like to use loans on the lender side, of course, your choice. But the recommended way to use resource sharing would be using these assumptions items being shipped out or being received are the responsibility of the resource sharing library, and the patrons are those that actually get the loans. So that loans in the system always mean real patron loans and never reflect transit situations, resource sharing situations, and so on. These all have their own statuses. Loans are loans, and they are always loans to the specific patrons. But again, anything that makes sense to you is, of course, valid. Okay, I think we're almost done. Well done. And I just wanted to say a last comment, and that is that in the site where you can, for the Ask the Expert, in the Learning Center, we encourage you to vote for the topics that you would like to see in the next Ask the Service, Ask the Expert sessions. So I've been asked to let you know that you can put your votes in here for what you would like to see in next sessions. We are working on scheduling the next sessions. So please do feel free to use this to mark your preferences with regard to that. By that, I think we are actually done. These are all the issues that I've received from you folks. If you have anything else that you would like to bring up at this point, either through the chat or just speak up, feel free. In any case, we'll continue to hang around here for a while. So if any of you wants to bring anything up, I'm still going to be connected. And of course, if after this session, anything that you want to share, ask, question about, feel free to contact any of us. We'll be happy to assist. Much.